I heard it again last Tuesday night, just after 1:15 in the morning, this thin, broken sound coming from the basement, like someone trying not to cry but failing. At first I thought it was the house settling. At 62 you get used to strange noises in old homes. But then a voice whispered, "Michael, please." It was the voice of my brother Daniel, the brother we buried 11 years ago. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, hand on the railing, trying to steady myself, because my knees felt like they were about to give out. I didn't want to believe what I had just heard. It wasn't the kind of sound you confuse with plumbing or wind. It was a voice, a voice, a voice that knew my name the way only someone who had said it thousands of times could. I whispered, "Daniel," before I even realized I was speaking out loud. My wife, Karen, stepped out of the bedroom. She was still half asleep, her robe hanging loosely around her. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice tight in a way I didn't recognize. I pointed toward the basement door and said, "Someone's down there." Karen didn't flinch the way I expected. Instead, she walked over, pushed the door shut, and said quietly, "Ignore it, Michael. Just go back to bed." The calmness in her voice made the whole thing feel wrong. I stared at her. "You heard it too?" I asked. She looked at me with this expression I hadn't seen since the year Daniel died, a mixture of fear, guilt, and something else I couldn't name. She shook her head. "It's nothing. Go back to sleep." And then the door slammed behind her hand, like someone on the other side had pulled it. I stepped back, startled, and Karen froze. For a second neither of us moved, but we both heard it. This low, shuddering sob that traveled through the floorboards like a vibration. "Michael," the voice whispered again, and I felt my whole chest seize up. I said, "I'm opening it." But Karen grabbed my wrist. "Don't," she said sharply. "You don't want to know what's down there." I yanked my hand free. "If someone needs help, I'm not leaving them." I opened the door again. The light switch flicked on, but for some reason the bulb didn't come to life, just a faint electric tick. The crying had stopped, replaced by a soft scraping sound somewhere deep below the stairs. "Daniel?" My voice cracked halfway through his name, and then Karen said, more resigned than scared, "He shouldn't have come back." I told him not to. That sentence hit me like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. She stepped back from the stairwell, her hands shaking now. "Michael, just listen to me. Please. Close the door." But I didn't. I took one step down, then another. The house felt too quiet, too expectant. When I reached the fourth step, a voice floated up, clearer this time. "It's cold down here." It was Daniel's voice. The exact tone he had the day he called me after Dad's funeral, shaky and vulnerable. But Daniel had been gone for over a decade. I turned back toward Karen. She looked pale. "Michael," she said, "there are things I never told you about the night he died." My heart started pounding because she had never once questioned the night of Daniel's death. She was the one who held me when I collapsed on the kitchen floor after the police called. She was the one who helped me clean out his apartment when I couldn't breathe from crying. What could she possibly have held back after all these years? "Start talking," I said. She took a breath, but then something slammed against the basement door from below so hard the staircase trembled. Karen screamed. I grabbed the railing to keep from falling. Another hit followed, this one accompanied by a hoarse, furious whisper. "Let me out." I stared into the darkness below. Something was moving, scraping, breathing. I didn't know if it was human or if my mind had finally cracked from years of grief. I didn't know if someone had broken in, or if this was some horrible trick. But I knew one thing. Karen was terrified of something she had never mentioned before, and my brother's name was echoing through the house he'd never set foot in. "Michael," Karen said, her voice shaking, "you need to hear the truth, but not here. Not while he's like this." The staircase creaked behind me, But I didn't move. "What did you do?" I asked. Because that's what it felt like now. Something she had done or known or hidden. She shook her head. "It's not what I did. It's what your brother asked me to hide the night before he disappeared." Before he disappeared, not died. Disappeared. I stepped back up the stairs, not because I believed her yet, but because I needed her to finish that sentence. She grabbed my arm. "Close the door, Michael, please." This time I did, but as the latch clicked into place, a voice whispered through the wood, closer than before, "Don't trust her." And I realized with a cold certainty, whatever was happening in my basement, I was standing between two voices, one I'd trusted for decades, and one I had buried. The rest of the house was dead silent. Karen was crying softly now, covering her mouth with her hand. I didn't know who to believe. I didn't know what lived or waited under my feet. But I knew this nothing about my brother's death was what I thought it was, and Karen wasn't the woman I thought she was. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. Karen stayed on her side of the bed, knees pulled up facing the wall like she was afraid I'd ask her something she wasn't ready to say. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every sound, every tremor that came from the basement. I kept hearing that whisper, "Don't trust her." It sat in my chest like a weight. By 5:30 a.m., I finally said, "We're talking, now." Karen didn't turn. She said, "You won't believe me," and for the first time since I'd known her, her voice sounded old, fragile, not from age, but from something she'd been carrying far too long. I pushed myself up. "But try me." She sat up slowly, wiping her eyes. "You remember the voicemail Daniel left you? The one you never got to hear? Because your phone died?" I nodded. I'd regretted that for years. Back then, voicemail couldn't be recovered once the phone reset. I always wondered what his last words were. She swallowed hard. "He called me that night, too." My stomach dropped. "Why would he call you?" She took a shaky breath. "Because he didn't want to scare you. Because he was already running from someone." I stared at her. "Running from who?" She shook her head. "He wouldn't say, only that he needed a place to hide, and he asked me not to tell you unless something happened." I didn't know what to feel. Anger, shock, betrayal. It all blurred together. "So he came here, to this house?" I asked. She hesitated. "He wanted to, but he never made it." Those words hit me hard. "Then why?" I said, pointing at the floor. "Is someone down there pretending to be him?" She didn't look surprised by the question. That scared me more than anything else. "Because Daniel told me he kept something," she whispered. "Something someone wanted badly enough to kill for." My throat tightened. "What?" Her voice cracked. "A ledger. Names, dates, payments. He never explained it, but he said if anyone found it they'd come for him, and possibly us." A heaviness filled the room. I thought about the voice in the dark, about the scraping sounds, the crying. I thought about the slam against the staircase that felt like a body hitting the door. "Karen," I said carefully, "are you saying you think someone is down there because of something Daniel took?" She shook her head fiercely. "No, I'm saying someone has been down there." That sentence made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. "What does that mean?" I asked. She looked at me like she'd been waiting years for this conversation. "After you identified Daniel at the morgue, I kept getting calls, blocked numbers. Always the same voice. Always the same message. 'We know you have it.' I didn't breathe for a moment. 'You never told me.'" She shook her head. "You were broken, Michael. You could barely stand. I couldn't add more." She paused. But then the calls stopped, and the noises started. My blood went cold. Noises from the basement. Her eyes filled again, soft ones at first. Like footsteps, or someone dragging fabric, I told myself. It was the furnace, or the pipes. Anything but what I feared. I rubbed my face with both hands. "Karen, why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Because the first time I finally worked up the courage to tell you, the voice whispered from the vent. Tell him and I'll come up, for a few seconds. I couldn't speak. I didn't know whether to comfort her or run downstairs with a weapon. My brother's supposed death had always felt off, too fast, too neat, too convenient, but now it felt orchestrated, deliberate. Why would he call you? I asked again, softer this time. She looked at her hands. Because you and Daniel always protected each other. He knew if he told you, you'd run into danger for him. He didn't want that. That stung more than it should have. He should have trusted me, I said. She whispered. He did. That's why he made sure you were far away. When he took the ledger, I froze. What do you mean far away? She looked up. He planned it. The timing, he needed someone to know the truth without being in danger. He chose me because I didn't have the same history you two had with those people. My pulse quickened. People? What people? She shook her head. I don't know who they are, but Daniel said they had money, power, and everything they did, every deal they made, went into that ledger. I stood up, pacing. The floor felt unstable beneath me. Karen, if someone has been down there, if someone is pretending to be Daniel, how long has this been going on? She hesitated. About 6 months. I spun to face her. 6 months? You're telling me someone has been living in our basement for half a year? She lifted her hands defensively. I didn't know it was a person at first. Just noises, then whispers, then crying. She looked at me desperately. I thought I was losing my mind. I sat beside her slowly. Despite everything, I still reached for her hand. Why didn't you move out? She shook her head. Because I didn't want to leave you alone with it. There was something tragically loyal in that. Even if everything else felt like a betrayal. Before I could speak again, something shifted in the hallway outside our bedroom. A soft shuffle like someone dragging a foot. We both froze. Then the same broken whisper that had haunted me all night murmured through the crack under the door. Michael, he's lying to you. I felt the world tilt. Who? I whispered. Karen's grip tightened on my arm. The voice answered. Your wife. And then something moved down the hallway, slow, deliberate, toward the basement door. A door that hadn't been opened in hours. When I stood, Karen whispered one last thing, trembling so hard her teeth clicked together. Michael, I never told you the worst part. The night Daniel called me, he wasn't alone. I didn't follow the sound right away. I wanted to, every nerve in my body pulling me toward that hallway like a magnet. But Karen's last words froze me in place. He wasn't alone. They echoed in my head with this cold hollowness I couldn't swallow. I turned back to her slowly. What do you mean he wasn't alone? She looked at the floor, eyes unfocused, like she was replaying something she didn't want to relive. When he called me, I heard someone breathing behind him. Not normal breathing. Panicked, frantic, like they were running. My stomach twisted. Running from what? She shook her head. He didn't say. Only that someone had been watching him for weeks. Someone who knew about the ledger. I started pacing again, feeling the walls close in, every part of me fighting the urge to open the bedroom door and sprint down the hall. Karen, I need you to tell me everything. No more holding back. She nodded, tears spilling down her face. He told me to keep you safe. That was the last thing he said before the line went dead. I stopped pacing. The police said he died instantly, I whispered. But Karen shook her head hard. That's the thing. I don't think he did. I think someone got to him first. The floor creaked outside our door again. A slow step, then another, and then a dragging sound like someone pulling a heavy blanket. It stopped right in front of our bedroom. Karen grabbed my hand. Don't open it, she whispered. Please, not yet. If it's really him, if it really is, he's not the same. I swallowed hard. You think he's alive? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was her answer. I stepped toward the door anyway. I couldn't stop myself. Michael, she whispered sharply. Listen to me. Whatever is in this house. It knows things. It knows everything Daniel told me. It knows where the ledger is hidden. I stopped 2 feet from the door. Where is it? She hesitated. In the basement. My chest tightened. You hid it down there? She shook her head. No, Daniel did. Before he disappeared. He told me it was the only place they wouldn't look. That didn't sit right. I repeated. She closed her eyes. He said there were 2 men. He never told me their names, just that they used to work with him, and that they'd kill him if he talked. I stared at her in disbelief. Why didn't you tell me any of this? She whispered. Because I didn't know who to trust. Because I didn't know who to trust. Because I didn't know if they were watching us too. Another sound came from the hallway. This time a soft knock. 3 slow taps, spaced far apart. Tap, 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 Karen whimpered. I said, Daniel? But there was no answer. Just the feeling that someone was inches from the other side of the door, waiting, listening, maybe even smiling. The thought made my skin crawl. The knock came again, but only once this time, sharp, impatient. I grabbed the doorknob. Karen lunged forward. Michael, don't, she cried, pulling at my arm. If the ledger is down there and they know you know, her voice broke. We're not safe. I looked at her. We're not safe with the door closed either. She let go of me reluctantly, her shoulders shaking. If you open it, she whispered. Don't let him see fear. That sentence chilled me more than anything I'd heard yet. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. No footprints on the carpet. No shadows, no movement, just stillness. So unnatural it felt staged. A moment later, Karen stepped beside me, gripping my sleeve. He was here, she whispered. I felt it. I did too, though I couldn't explain how. The air still felt disturbed, like someone had just walked through it, and then something caught my eye. At the end of the hallway, near the top of the basement stairs, the basement door was slightly open. Not wide, just a sliver. Enough to show someone had been there. Enough to show someone wanted us to notice. I walked toward it slowly. Karen stayed behind me, too scared to get closer. When I reached the door, I pushed it gently. It creaked open. The basement was completely dark. Then something moved at the bottom of the stairs, a shuffle, a faint exhale. I whispered, Daniel, again. And this time a voice answered, but not the broken whisper from before. This one was low, steady, almost rehearsed. Come down, Michael. I have something you lost. Karen made a choked sound behind me. Don't go, she begged. Please, don't go down there alone. The voice spoke again, sounding closer. He's not telling you everything, Karen. Her hand tightened on my back. That's not him, she whispered. That's not Daniel. Something in the voice felt wrong. Familiar, but not in the way grief makes you imagine familiar things. More like someone who had practiced the tone. Someone who wanted me to believe it was him. Show yourself, I said. The darkness didn't move. Then a soft metallic clink echoed up the stairs. A coin, a ring, I couldn't tell. I left something for you, the voice said. On the 3rd step, pick it up. I looked at Karen. What's on the 3rd step? She shook her head frantically. Michael, don't touch anything he leaves. But I couldn't look away. I took 1 step down. Then another. Karen's breath hitched behind me. On the 3rd step rested a small, tarnished object. A pendant. The exact pendant Daniel wore since he was 15. A silver crescent my father gave him. The same pendant he was supposedly buried with. Karen whispered, That's impossible. I crouched down slowly, picking it up. My fingers trembled. It was real, heavy, cold. The chain was broken as if torn off. I whispered, This was buried with him, the voice in the dark said softly. Not everything was. I straightened, clutching the pendant. My heart hammered in my chest. Karen's voice came out in a broken whisper. Michael, come back up. I turned. She was pale, shaking, staring at the pendant, like it was something cursed. The voice down below spoke one last time, quieter, almost intimate. You buried the wrong man. I felt the world tilt. The air in the basement shifted. Karen pulled me back up the stairs, her strength fueled by fear I couldn't ignore. When we reached the top, she slammed the door shut, and then through the wood we heard soft laughter that didn't sound like my brother at all. The laughter didn't stop right away. It lingered behind the basement door like a presence leaning against it, savoring our fear. Each low chuckle crawled under my skin, crawling down my spine like cold fingers. Then, as suddenly as it began, it went silent. So abruptly it felt intentional. Performed. Karen stood frozen with her hands still pressed against the door, as if her palms alone held back whatever was beneath us. I gently took her wrist. Come on, I whispered. We need to get away from the basement. She nodded, but she didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the grain of the wood, wide and unfocused. Karen, she blinked like she was waking from a trance. Michael, that voice, did you hear it clearly? I swallowed hard. I heard something. No, she said, shaking her head as though she were trying to rid herself of a memory. You heard a man. I heard something else. What did you hear? I asked. My voice reluctant. She hesitated, her jaw tightening. It sounded like Daniel at first, but only for a second. Then, it shifted. She wrapped her arms around herself, like someone imitating him, or something that didn't understand how human speech works. A chill spread unevenly across my chest. You're saying it wasn't a person? She didn't answer. I wanted to tell her she was imagining things, that grief was getting to her, that the darkness in the basement could twist anyone's senses. But I couldn't, not after the pendant. Not after the knock on the door. Not after that voice saying we'd buried the wrong man. I turned the pendant over in my hand again. Its edges were worn exactly where Daniel always thumbed them when he was nervous. A tiny dent near the crescent's tip, from when he dropped it on the driveway years ago. Still there. No replica could capture that. I pocketed the pendant and forced myself to breathe evenly. We need answers, I said. But not here. Let's go to the living room. Karen nodded, rubbing her arms as though the house had suddenly grown colder. We moved down the hall together, staying close, every step echoing louder than it should have. The house felt different now, not empty, but interrupted, like we had stepped into someone else's memory. A shadow crossed the corner of my eye, near the family photo wall, but when I turned, nothing stood there. Karen sat on the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. I sat across from her and leaned forward. Start from the beginning, I said. Everything Daniel told you, every detail. She hesitated. You don't understand, she whispered. If I tell you, you'll want to go back into that basement, and if you do that, you'll die. Karen, I'm already involved. You already told me enough to put us both at risk, so don't stop now. She winced, like my words physically hurt her. Then she took a deep breath. Daniel didn't quit the company, she said quietly. He was fired because he discovered something he wasn't supposed to know. He never told me exactly what it was, only that it involved offshore accounts, and two men who were using the company to launder money for somebody. Somebody. I repeated. Karen, you're being vague, because he was being vague. She shot back. He didn't trust phone calls. He didn't trust emails. He didn't even trust meeting in the same place twice. I fell silent as her hands trembled around the edges of a throw blanket. He found a ledger, she continued. A physical one, old-fashioned. Names, dates, transactions. And she looked at the floor. And something else. something he didn't recognize. Symbols that looked like they were copied from old manuscripts. It scared him more than the money trail did. Symbols? I frowned. Like cult stuff? I don't know, she whispered. He just kept calling it the old writing, and that's what's in the basement. Karen nodded. That's why they wanted it, not because of the money. Because of the symbols. Daniel said the two men, his old co-workers, weren't acting on their own. They were following orders they didn't even understand. Silence settled heavily between us, and he thought they would kill him for it. I said slowly. Karen's eyes welled again. He didn't think. He knew. They came to the apartment. I wasn't home. He called me while hiding in the closet. He said he could hear two pairs of footsteps. One of them kept whispering something over and over, something in a language he didn't recognize. My skin prickled. He told me, she whispered, that the whisper wasn't human, and that whatever was whispering wasn't one of the men. She looked at me with trembling fear. There were 3 of them in the apartment. 2 human, 1 not. My breath caught. And Daniel told you all this? I whispered. She nodded. And then he told me to hide the ledger. But he didn't trust me to leave the apartment safely, so he hid it himself. I didn't know where. Until tonight. Something inside me tightened, pulling me back toward the basement, toward the darkness waiting below. But I stayed seated. What happened the night he died? I asked softly. Karen swallowed. He told me he was coming here, she said, not to see you, but because he knew they wouldn't follow him onto family property. He said the place was protected. Protected how? I don't know. She wiped her eyes. He never explained. Protected. That word gnawed at me, before I could ask more. A sound drifted down the hallway, not from the basement this time, from upstairs. A faint thump, then a second one, measured, slow, heavy. Karen and I locked eyes. That's the guest room, she whispered. I stood. Stay here, Michael. I'll only look. She grabbed my sleeve. Take something with you. I lifted the fireplace poker from beside the hearth. It felt ridiculous, carrying a piece of wrought iron to face whatever was in my childhood home, but I held onto it tightly. I stepped into the hallway again, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The air felt heavier than before, like it was thick with breath I couldn't see. I reached the bottom of the staircase and paused. Another thump above, then something dragged across the guest room floor. Slowly, deliberately. I ascended the stairs one at a time, each step slower than the last. Halfway up I heard a whisper. So faint I thought I imagined it at first. It said my name, not angrily, not threateningly, almost pleading. Michael, Daniel's voice, but wrong, echoing where it shouldn't. Stretched ace, like someone pulling his voice across. Too much space. I reached the landing. The guest room door was closed. Another whisper. Michael, let me in. My blood ran cold. Daniel used to say that when we were kids, whenever I locked him out of my room, Michael, let me in. I tightened my grip on the poker. Daniel, I whispered. The voice on the other side paused. Then, in a tone that turned my veins to ice, how did you know it was me? I stepped back. The door handle turned, slowly, silently. I raised the poker. The handle turned again, more insistent this time, and then a low, distorted laugh seeped through the crack of the door frame. The same laugh we had heard from the basement. The laugh didn't rise in volume. That somehow made it worse. It slithered through the thin gap between the door and frame like smoke, soft but deliberate, aware of its audience. I took another step back, lowering my stance, gripping the poker with both hands now. The voice behind the door shifted into a quiet breath, like someone pressing their lips against the wood. Michael. This time the whisper stretched in a way a real voice couldn't, not without something breaking in the throat. It had an upward bend at the end. Curious, amused, like it was trying the name on for size. I forced myself to swallow. Who's in there? Silence. Then, a faint click. Not the door, something small, something metal. A tiny object rolling slowly across the guest room floor until it hit the other side of the door. With a soft tap, my skin crawled. Michael, Karen's voice drifted up the staircase, trembling. Are you okay? I didn't take my eyes off the door. Stay downstairs. Don't come up here. The thing behind the door shifted again, dragging something lightly. Fabric, maybe. Or skin. A soft scrape moved closer. I felt the floorboards beneath me respond to its weight, subtle vibrations traveling through the house's old bones. If it opened that door, I wasn't sure what I'd see on the other side, or if I'd survive it. But then something unexpected happened. The handle stopped turning. The dragging stopped. The barely audible breath fell silent. For a few seconds there was nothing. No movement. No whisper. No laugh. On the steel. Hard. Fast. A heavy slam hit the door from the inside. I flinched backward, nearly losing my footing on the top step. Another slam followed, and another, each more violent, the hinges whining under the force. The frame shook, dust drifting from the molding. Whatever stood inside that room wanted out badly, or wanted me in. From downstairs, Karen screamed. Michael, come down. The blows continued. The door was old. It wouldn't last long. I backed toward the stairs, eyes locked on the handle. It jumped with each impact, rattling, wobbling, loosening in its socket. One more hit, and the entire thing might be ripped out. But as I reached the top step, everything went still. No slam, no whisper. Just the creaking of the house settling around me. Then, very quietly, from behind the door came the unmistakable sound of someone kneeling. The floorboards groaned under shifting weight. A soft exhale followed, close, right at the threshold. And then a voice, so gentle it nearly undid me. Don't go. I ran. Not down the stairs in a wild panic. I forced myself to move steadily, quickly, gripping the railing so tightly, my knuckles whitened. If I ran full speed and slipped, I would break my neck. So I kept my pace controlled, descending step by careful step, until I reached the bottom, where Karen stood clutching the edge of the wall like it was a lifeline. What happened? She whispered. I don't know, I said. My voice came out harsher than I intended. But something's in that room. It spoke to me. Karen's eyes widened. Daniel again? I shook my head slowly. Not Daniel. Not entirely. Then I told her about the slamming, the dragging, the whisper, about how it changed tone mid-sentence, how it asked me not to leave, how it sounded almost like my brother, but not quite, not enough. Karen backed away, covering her mouth. It's worse than I thought, she whispered. They followed him here. What do you mean they? You said 2 men, and something else in the apartment. She pointed toward the ceiling, her voice shaking. That thing upstairs? It's not human, Michael. Daniel said it could mimic people. That was part of why he didn't trust anyone near the end. He said he kept hearing copies. Copies? She nodded. Of me. Of you. Of him. It was like someone replaying a recording, but only getting the pitch right halfway through. I exhaled slowly. So if that isn't Daniel upstairs, then what was the thing in the basement? Karen shook her head again, tears in her eyes. Daniel told me he didn't know how many there were, or what they wanted, only that they followed anyone who touched the ledger. The ledger. The damned ledger in my childhood home. You said you didn't know where he hid it, I said. But you realized tonight, she nodded. Because of what it said, the thing downstairs. When it told us we buried the wrong man, that was a hint. A hint, Karen. Talk straight. She pulled in a shuddering breath. Daniel hid the ledger with something important to him. Something no one else knew about. Something he thought would never be touched. She hesitated. Something he believed was safe in your house. My house, I muttered, trying to piece it together. What could Daniel hide here that no one would ever find? Karen looked at me, and in that moment I saw a truth she'd been holding inside her since the night he died. He thought your father's things were protected, she said quietly. He said the house felt watched. I almost laughed, but the sound died before leaving my throat. My father's things, Karen. My father hasn't been alive for 40 years. I know, she said softly. But Daniel believed your father's notebooks had something in them. Something old, something that kept the house sealed. I stared at her. My father's notebooks. The journals he kept locked in the workshop. She nodded. Daniel thought those had some kind of protection spell on them. Karen didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a trembling step back from me. Michael, she whispered, did your father ever tell you why he built this house the way he did? I frowned. What does that mean? She looked toward the basement door. Because Daniel said your father didn't build it alone. My stomach dropped. Before I could respond, a violent crash erupted from upstairs. The entire house shook with the blow. Something heavy had thrown itself against the guest room door, hard enough that dust and wood splinters rained down onto the hallway below. Karen grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. It's going to get out. We need to leave, I said. No, Karen said, shaking her head rapidly. If we leave, it follows. It always follows. Daniel said the only safe place was here inside the house, while the protections still hold. I looked around at the old walls, the worn molding, the dim hallway light flickering overhead. This house, a safe place? Protected by my father? Protected from what? A second crash upstairs made the ceiling crack visibly. Then a voice, louder now, echoed through the house, warped and trembling as though spoken through water. Michael, open the door. Karen covered her ears, eyes squeezed shut. I stepped closer to her, pulling her into me as the house shook again. It knows your name, she whispered. It knows your voice. It knows everything. Daniel knew. The ceiling groaned. We can't stay by the stairs, she said. If it breaks through, we'll be trapped between floors. Then where do we go? I hissed. She looked toward the basement. No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. We don't have a choice, she whispered. Daniel didn't hide the ledger upstairs. He hid it below, and whatever's down there wants it back. The upstairs door cracked loudly. Then another impact hit, this one so strong the floor beneath us shook. Karen clutched my jacket. Michael, she whispered. I turned to her. We have to go into the basement now, because when that door breaks, whatever's pretending to be your brother isn't going to wait. For a long second, I just stared at Karen. The idea of stepping toward that basement door, after what we'd heard, after the laugh, after the knock, after the voice claiming we'd buried the wrong man, felt insane. But the ceiling above us groaned again, followed by a sharp crack, and dust drifted down like gray snow. Whatever was in the guest room was almost through. Karen tugged at my sleeve. Michael, please, we have to move now. I forced my legs to move, even though every instinct screamed at me to run out the front door and never look back. Instead, we crept down the hallway past the family photos, toward the basement entrance. I paused only once, long enough to glance up the stairs. The guest room door at the top was bulging inward. Wood splintered around the hinges. Something pressed against it from the inside with slow, crushing force. Michael, that stretched, broken voice, seeped through the cracks. I snapped my gaze away. We reached the basement door. I tightened my grip on the poker, my hands slick with sweat. Karen stood behind me, trembling but steady. I twisted the knob slowly. Unlocked. Of course it was. When the door opened, the darkness beyond felt thicker than before, as if the basement had been holding its breath. My father had always kept a bulb above the stairs, but tonight it flickered once and then died, leaving us with nothing but the dim hallway light at our backs. "Stay close to me," I whispered. Karen nodded, clutching my arm. We stepped inside. The house shifted above us. One last violent shudder, then a sound like a door cracking apart. The upstairs thing wasn't contained anymore. It was loose. The knowledge made the stairs under my feet feel thin, fragile, as though each step took us further away from safety. I closed the basement door quietly behind us. We descended in near total blackness. Only the faintest glow from the hallway filtered down. Something dripped somewhere in the shadows, a single slow tap echoing like a metronome. Tap, tap, tap. "This was a bad idea," I whispered. "No," Karen murmured. "It's the only idea left." We reached the bottom step. The concrete floor felt somehow colder than before. The basement smelled faintly of old paint dust, and something else, a metallic tang I didn't want to identify. Karen pointed toward the far corner. "If he hit it, it's there." I squinted. "Where?" "In the workshop doorway. My father's old workshop. The room he kept locked until the day he died." The door was slightly open now, a sliver of pitch black inside, like a mouth waiting to swallow anyone foolish enough to step closer. I raised the poker as we walked toward it. Each footstep echoed differently, a hollow, plugged-ear sensation that made my stomach twist. The air felt wrong, as if it had been disturbed recently. Something had been moving down here. Maybe still was. We reached the workshop door. Karen hovered behind me, gripping the back of my shirt. "Michael," she whispered. "Wait, what?" "Listen." I held my breath. At first I heard nothing. Then softly, faintly, a whisper drifted out of the workshop. But it wasn't calling my name this time. It was reciting something. A string of syllables, guttural and sharp. Nothing I recognized. The voice was low, layered, like two tones speaking at once. A sound that wasn't shaped by human vocal cords. Karen's grip tightened. "That's the language Daniel heard." The voice stopped abruptly, as though it sensed us. "You know when an animal turns its head toward you in the dark? You feel it before you see it." The workshop felt like that. Attention shifting toward us with slow, deliberate awareness. "We're not alone," I whispered. Karen nodded, tears filling her eyes. I nudged the door open with the poker. It creaked loudly. Too loudly. I winced. Inside the workshop was just as I remembered, chaotic, dusty shelves, old tools, cardboard boxes crammed against the walls. The air smelled like sawdust and ancient paper. Only one thing was different. A large, heavy trunk in the corner was open, and something had rifled through it. Papers were scattered on the floor. Notebooks torn open, pages ripped out, my father's handwriting shredded and thrown aside like someone, or something, had been searching for something specific. But the ledger wasn't there. Karen knelt, frantically sifting through torn papers. He said it had a dark red cover. "Look for that." I scanned the room, with growing dread. "It's not here. Someone already took it." "No," Karen insisted. "No," Daniel said the house was safe. He said the protections, a scraping sound behind us made both of us freeze. Slow, uneven, heavy. Not from inside the workshop, from the basement stairs. The thing from upstairs had found the basement door. I turned just as the basement door, thick wood reinforced with old screws, shuddered under a blow. Then another. Dust sprinkled down from the rafters. Karen's voice cracked. "Oh God, it's coming." I pulled her toward the far side of the workshop, deeper into the shadows. The basement door shuddered again, louder this time. Something climbed down the stairs with a slow, dragging gait, deliberate, patient. "Hide," I whispered. Now, we slipped behind my father's old tool bench, just as the basement door swung open. A figure entered. Tall. Too tall. Its silhouette was wrong, limbs slightly longer than they should be, shoulders uneven, head tilted as though listening to something we couldn't hear. It paused at the foot of the stairs. Then it spoke. Not in English, not in any language I'd ever heard. Its voice scraped through the basement, like metal dragged across stone. Karen buried her face in my shoulder, trembling violently. The figure stepped forward, slow, searching. It sniffed the air, its head twitched, jerking in small, rapid movements. Then it said something else, too softly to understand, but the tone curdled my blood. It sounded excited. I gripped the poker, ready to swing if it came closer. Then the figure paused. It turned its head toward the workshop. It knew. It stepped forward. One slow step. Then another. Just before reaching the threshold, it stopped. A low, almost thoughtful growl vibrated from it. Then it reached into its pocket. My breath stopped. It pulled out a book, dark red, worn edges. The ledger. Karen gasped quietly, tightening her grip on my arm so hard it hurt. The creature, or the man, or whatever puppet wore human shape, held the ledger up to its face. It opened the cover. A thick, wet breath escaped it, a sound that didn't belong in any human throat. It turned pages slowly, reverently. Then it whispered one word, in perfect English. Found. Karen stifled a sob. The figure closed the ledger gently. Then its head snapped upward toward us, toward our hiding place. Its voice deepened, stretching into something monstrous. As it whispered Michael, I nearly dropped the poker. It knew exactly where we were. The creature took one step forward. 2, 3. Karen dug her nails into my arm. We can't fight it, she whispered. You can't hit that with a piece of iron. Then something clicked beside my hand. A switch. The workshop's old breaker. And suddenly I remembered something. 6 years ago, I'd helped my father rewire the workshop. He'd insisted, absolutely insisted, on grounding the workshop separately from the rest of the house. In case any energy gets in here, he'd said. Back then, I'd thought he meant electrical surges. Now I wasn't so sure. I touched the switch with my thumb. The creature leaned closer to the workbench, breathing heavily. Michael, it whispered again. I flipped the switch. The workshop light blazed on with a violent snap, bright enough to momentarily blind me. The creature screamed, not a human scream. Something older, something furious. Its body jerked backward as though struck by invisible force, slamming into the concrete wall hard enough to crack the surface. The ledger fell from its hand, skidding across the floor toward us. It scrambled against the ground, convulsing, limbs spasming as the grounded electrical field pulsed around us. Grab it, Karen yelled. I didn't think. I lunged for the ledger. As my fingers closed around the red cover, the creature lunged too, half-blind, furious, its arm stretching too far, its voice shredding through the air. Give it back. I pulled Karen toward the back exit of the workshop, clutching the ledger to my chest. The creature crashed into the workbench, sending tools flying. We ran. We didn't look back. Not at the workshop, not at the writhing thing screaming behind us, not at the sparks flickering along the grounded light fixture. I just dragged Karen through the narrow passage at the back of the workshop, the one my father had carved out decades ago to store lumber and paint cans. I never understood why he'd insisted on adding a separate exit from this room, an exit that didn't appear on the house blueprints. Now, I understood. He hadn't been trying to store wood, he'd been trying to build a way out. The passage twisted left, then right, the concrete growing colder with each step. The smell changed too, less dust, more damp earth. The house was old, but this space was older. It felt carved rather than built. Behind us, the creature slammed into the doorway, its roar strangled and distorted as the grounded current continued to lash its skin. But the crackling was fading. The workshop light was dimming, flickering in and out as the creature fought its way past whatever protection my father had wired into the walls. It's coming. Karen gasped, stumbling as the floor sloped downward. I know. Faster. I'm trying. The ledger thumped against my chest with each stride. The leather cover was warm, too warm, and I could feel something pulsing faintly inside it, like a heartbeat. The symbols burned into the edges glowed with the faintest red when the workshop light flickered behind us. We reached the end of the passage. A wooden door stood in front of us, reinforced with metal brackets, a thick bolt, and a lock so old it looked medieval. My father had always told me never to open it. As a kid I thought it was because of mold or asbestos, or some outdated wiring. Now, standing in front of it with something inhuman chasing me, I realized it wasn't mold he'd been worried about. Karen slammed her hands against the door. Open it. I'm trying, I yelled, fumbling with the rusty bolt. The thing screeched again. Closer this time. The echo carried down the concrete like a blade. Come on, come on. The bolt snapped open. Karen shoved the door with both hands, and it swung out into a much larger chamber, pitch black, cold, and filled with the faint smell of cedar. I grabbed the edge of the door and yanked Karen inside with me. Close it, she cried. I slammed it shut and pulled the bolt back down, just as something heavy crashed against the passage wall. Karen stumbled backward. Light, Michael. Please, light. I fumbled for the switch near the door. My father had installed one here too, though I didn't remember it ever working. I flipped it. Nothing. Karen covered her mouth, shaking, eyes darting wildly through the darkness. We can't see anything. We don't know what's in here. Another slam hit the door. Harder this time. A low growl vibrated through the wood, rattling the hinges. My father had built this door to stop something. I prayed it was strong enough to stop that. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The battery was low, but the flashlight worked. A pale circle of light cut through the blackness, illuminating walls of rough stone. Stone, not concrete. The chamber wasn't part of the house. My father didn't build this, I whispered. Karen didn't answer. She was staring wide-eyed at something on the far wall. What is that? She whispered. I lifted the phone higher. Carvings. Dozens of them. Symbols identical to the ones on the ledger. Curved lines, jagged marks, circles intersecting at impossible angles. Some looked burned into the stone, rather than carved. What is this place? Karen whispered. I shook my head. I don't know. You said your father never mentioned it? No. Then why would he build a door to hide it? I didn't have an answer. The creature slammed the door again. Harder this time. The hinges groaned. Dust sifted down from the frame. Karen grabbed my arm. It's going to break through. Then we need to find another way out. Where? This isn't a room. It's a tomb. I turned the flashlight across the far end of the chamber. The carvings grew denser there, almost frantic. Beneath them sat an old wooden table, covered in dusty books, candles, and jars filled with substances I didn't recognize. My father's handwriting covered the open notebook on the table. Karen stepped closer, lifting a trembling hand toward it. This is your father's. I flipped to the first page. Notes on the South Passage. Do not unseal it. Not alone, not ever. My breath caught. Another slam against the door. This one cracked the wood around the top hinge. Karen yelped, stepping away from the shaking wall. We don't have much time, she cried. I flipped the page. Notes on the entity. It mimics voices. It imitates emotion. It learns, it always learns. Never speak to it directly. Never answer when it calls your name. My stomach twisted into a hard knot. Another line, it wants the ledger. It has always wanted the ledger. My hands shook. Michael, Karen whispered, touching my shoulder. What does it say? I swallowed. My father knew. He knew about this. He knew something was down here. A thunderous impact hit the basement passage door. The bolt bowed inward. Karen screamed. "We have to go. We can't. Not unless there's another exit." I scanned the chamber again. The carvings, the symbols, the notebook. And then, on the far side of the stone wall, a second door, this one smaller, reinforced with iron bands. Older than the house, maybe older than anything my father built. "There," I shouted. Karen saw it too. We ran, the flashlight bobbing wildly. The door looked ancient, with a rusted ring handle and faint symbols etched into the wood. I grabbed the handle. It didn't budge. Karen tried with me. It stuck. Behind us, the chamber door shook again, wood cracking. I dropped the ledger on the floor and threw my weight against the smaller door. It didn't move. I pulled, I shoved. Nothing. Damn it. Karen stepped back, staring at the symbols. "Wait, look at this." "What?" "These symbols. Some match the ledger." She knelt, flipping the leather cover open. The red glow from the edges grew stronger. When Daniel described this to me, he said the ledger wasn't just evidence. He said it was a key. The creature slammed the outer door again. A hinge snapped. Karen slid her hand along the carved symbols, aligning the ledger to the pattern on the door. The markings glowed. Not bright, just enough to pulse. "Do it again," I yelled. She pressed the ledger against the door. The markings glowed stronger. A loud click echoed inside the doorframe. "It's unlocking," Karen cried. Another slam. This one broke the chamber door open a few inches. A gray, elongated hand slid through, nails scraping the stone wall. Karen screamed. I grabbed the handle and pulled with everything I had. The smaller door gave way. Cold air rushed out. Air that smelled like cedar rain, and something fresh. A tunnel stretched beyond. I grabbed the ledger, shoved Karen inside, and turned back just in time to see the creature yank the chamber door wide open, its face twisting with hunger and fury. It lunged. I dove through the smaller door and slammed it shut behind us. The creature hit the door so hard the stone walls shook. Karen held the ledger to her chest. "Michael, where does this tunnel go?" My voice shook. "I don't know." Behind us the creature screamed, and the door began to crack. The tunnel swallowed the light from my phone almost immediately, like the darkness was thicker here. Heavier somehow. Every sound felt amplified. The crackle of our footsteps on the dirt, our breathing, the distant muffled pounding on the door behind us. The creature wasn't giving up. It wasn't even slowing down. Karen kept glancing back over her shoulder, clutching the ledger, as if it were the only thing keeping the tunnel from collapsing. "How long do you think that door will hold?" "Not long. Keep moving." "How far does this go?" "I don't know." "You keep saying that," she snapped, her voice trembling more from fear than anger. "You're supposed to know this house. It's your childhood home." "I didn't know this was here," I said. "None of this was supposed to be here." Another crack echoed behind us. Stone shifting, wood splintering. Karen swallowed hard. "Michael, if that thing gets through, it won't get us. Keep moving." I wasn't sure if I believed that, but I needed her to keep going. The tunnel gradually sloped deeper underground. The air turned colder, but cleaner too. Somewhere ahead, I could hear a faint drip of water, slow, rhythmic, steady. My father had dug out a lot of strange things in this house, but this wasn't his work. The stone walls were smooth, ancient-looking, too perfect, too deliberate. This place had been carved by someone who used tools older than the house itself, maybe older than anyone I ever knew. "Do you hear that?" Karen whispered. I stopped, listened. Not just dripping water. Voices. Faint, distant, whispering. Hundreds of them, layered on top of each other like leaves in a storm. Karen's eyes widened. "Please tell me that's the water." "It's not," I said quietly. The tunnel bent to the left, then straightened. My flashlight flickered. Karen grabbed my arm. Michael, don't you dare let that go out. I'm not, I whispered, shaking the phone. Just move. But the whispers grew louder, the deeper we walked. They weren't words, not exactly, just sounds that felt like thoughts halfway formed. Murmurs, pleading, breathing, the kind of sounds people make when they think no one is listening. Karen pressed closer to me. Why are they getting louder? Because we're getting closer to where they're coming from. Where is that? I wish I knew. A thud echoed behind us. Closer now. The creature must have broken through the chamber door. Karen froze. Michael, don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. We ran. The tunnel widened just enough for us to move side by side, our footsteps thundering in the hollow space. The whispers rose with us, swelling, intensifying, overlapping one another. Karen covered her ears. Make it stop. Please make it stop. I can't, I said. Just keep going. My head, Michael, it's like they're inside my skull. Focus on me. Look at me. I can't. Yes, you can. Keep looking at me. We're almost there. Where is there? I don't know yet, I said. Honestly, she squeezed her eyes shut, breathing fast, shaking. I can't do this. You can. You will. Another thud behind us, much closer, too close. We kept running. The tunnel suddenly opened up into a wide stone chamber, circular, domed, ancient-looking. My flashlight revealed marks carved into the floor, the same twisted symbols from the ledger, arranged in concentric circles that spiraled toward a stone pedestal in the center of the room. But what stopped me cold wasn't the pedestal. It was the figure slumped against it. Karen saw him too. Oh my God. A man, maybe in his 40s, sat with his back to the pedestal, head bowed, hands tied in front of him, with rope that had rotted nearly to threads. His skin was pale, almost gray. He wasn't moving. Karen turned her face into my shoulder. Michael, he's dead. Stay behind me, I said. No, we can't just leave him, Karen. Please. I moved closer cautiously. The man's chest didn't rise. His eyes were half open, glassy. Whatever had happened to him, it had happened a long time ago. Karen whispered, Who is he? I don't know. But he's been here for years. The ledger pulsed faintly in her arms. The man wasn't holding anything, but beneath him, pressed against the pedestal, was a second book, smaller, bound in cloth, marked with the same symbols. Karen knelt slowly. A second ledger. My heartbeat spiked. Don't touch it. I have to. Karen, she reached for it. The whispers surged, not loud, just sharper, clearer, focused. The pedestal hummed faintly. Karen lifted the second ledger. It was old, fragile, cold. Michael, look. On the first page was a name. Jonathan Hale. Karen looked up at me. Is that? My throat tightened. My father's brother. You never said he had a brother. I didn't know. This ledger belonged to him. Michael, what was your family involved in? Before I could answer, a low growl filled the chamber. The creature had reached the opening of the tunnel. It stood silhouetted in the entrance. Taller than before, its limbs elongated, its back arched unnaturally. Its eyes glowed faintly, but its face, it looked more human now, more defined, like it had learned something new. And it smiled. Karen grabbed my arm. Michael, get behind me. The creature stepped into the chamber, dragging one distorted hand along the stone wall, leaving scratches that sparked faint red. So, it rasped. Voice twisted but unmistakably mimicking speech. You brought it back. Karen froze. It's talking. No, I said. It's imitating. It tilted its head. Give it. Karen clutched both ledgers tighter. No. Stay away from us. The creature took another step. I grabbed a rusted pipe, lying near the rotted ropes. It was useless as a weapon, but it was something. "Stay back," it hissed, its smile widening until the skin around its mouth cracked. Then it lunged. Karen screamed. I swung the pipe uselessly as the creature barreled toward us. But something stopped it. A pulse of light burst from the ledgers, both of them slamming into the stone symbols carved into the floor. For a moment the entire chamber glowed red. The creature recoiled, shrieking, its skin blistering where the light touched it. Karen held the ledgers out instinctively, like shields. "Michael, it's burning it," the symbols. "Hold them steady," I yelled. The creature writhed, shrinking back, but it didn't leave. It crouched at the edge of the carved circles, pacing like a trapped animal, waiting for the light to dim again. It wouldn't stay back forever. Karen's voice shook. "Michael, what do we do now?" I looked at the two ledgers. My family's secrets, my father's warnings, my uncle's last act. The truth was written in them, and the creature wanted it desperately. I took a deep breath. We read. Karen hesitated. "What?" "We read them. Both of them. Whatever's inside, it's the only thing our families ever used to keep this thing back. We figure out what they knew. We figure out how they trapped it before. And if we can't," the creature slammed its hand against the invisible barrier. Cracks spread across the stone floor. I swallowed. "Then we won't make it out of here." Karen handed me my father's ledger and opened my uncle's. The creature crouched, ready to spring. And together Karen and I began to read. The chamber pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. As we read, the ledgers were heavy, not just in weight, but in presence, as if the words themselves held gravity. Karen's hands shook. The leather covers pressed tight against her chest. Every symbol we traced with our eyes felt alive, vibrating beneath our fingertips. The whispering had turned into a low hum, circling the chamber, pressing against our ears, tugging at our minds. The creature crouched at the edge of the glowing circles, its elongated limbs twitching with anticipation, its head swiveled unnaturally, tracking every movement. But it didn't move closer. Not yet. It was cautious, aware that crossing the boundary would mean pain, or worse. I realized then that the ledgers weren't just keys, they were weapons, but ones we didn't fully understand. "Michael," Karen's voice trembled. "Some of these symbols, they're spells, protective seals. That's what Dad and Uncle Jonathan meant. The ledgers aren't just records. They're instructions." I swallowed hard. Instructions for what? Instructions for keeping it out. The creature hissed and lashed its claws against the outer edge of the circle, leaving deep gouges in the stone. Sparks flew with each strike. Its distorted voice hissed, attempting to mimic mine. "Give it back." I ignored it, my eyes glued to the ledger. Each line of text seemed to rearrange itself as we read, symbols shifting, letters moving, forming patterns. It was like the books were alive, guiding us, teaching us, warning us. My father and uncle had left more than words. They'd left knowledge, knowledge meant to protect us, to trap this thing, to survive. Karen leaned close. "It's a ritual. Both ledgers together. One opens, the other completes it. We have to read aloud, in order." I nodded, though my voice shook. Together, the creature's breathing was low, guttural, but I could hear it trying to imitate our cadence. It knew the power of these ledgers. It knew this wasn't a fight. It could win physically, but it wanted the knowledge, the ledger, more than anything. We began reading, slowly at first, words in a language I didn't understand. The sounds were guttural, melodic, ancient. Karen's voice quavered, but I matched her rhythm, trying to mimic the emphasis my father's notes had indicated. As we continued, a warmth spread from the ledgers through our hands. The carved symbols on the floor glowed brighter, pulsing in sync with the words. The air became charged, vibrating in my chest, and making my teeth buzz. The creature shrieked and flailed, but the glow pushed it back. The more we read, the more it retreated, circling the chamber, unable to break through the invisible boundary the ledgers projected. Sparks licked at the edges of the circle, red and violent, as if the chamber itself were alive. I glanced at Karen. "Keep going. We're almost there." Her hands tightened on the ledgers. "Michael, it's changing." I followed her gaze. The creature's face, previously a grotesque mimicry of human features, was melting, distorting into something less defined, less threatening. Its form wavered, flickering like a shadow under sunlight. It screamed, not in sound, but in something older, deeper, a primal wail that rattled the bones. Then the chanting reached a crescendo. The ledgers vibrated violently in our hands, shaking us to the core. The red glow from the carvings flared like fire, filling the chamber with light so bright it burned the darkness from every corner. The creature roared, a sound so deafening I thought my skull would split. Then it recoiled, stumbling backward as if struck by an invisible force. Karen gasped. "Michael, it's working." The final words of the ritual poured from our mouths, jagged, precise, as if the ledgers themselves dictated our speech. The red glow hit its peak, covering the chamber floor like molten lava. The creature shrieked once, twice, thrashing violently. Its distorted limbs began to unravel, folding into itself like smoke being sucked into a vacuum. The screeching became a high-pitched whine, then silence, and finally nothing. The chamber was still. The ledgers, warm in our hands, pulsed faintly before going dark. The carved symbols dimmed, leaving only faint etchings in the stone. Karen dropped to her knees, panting, tears streaming down her face. It's gone." I leaned against the wall, exhausted beyond words, heart hammering in my chest. The air still smelled faintly of cedar and metal, but the oppressive weight of the presence was gone. The whispers had stopped. The hum had vanished. Even the darkness seemed less hostile, as if the chamber itself was relieved. I looked at the lifeless figure slumped against the pedestal. Its body had dissolved into shadows, leaving no trace, as though it had never existed, except for the memory etched into the stone and the shaking in my own hands. I swallowed hard. "Karen, it's over." She nodded, sobbing. "We did it." I couldn't speak. The reality of surviving, of defeating something older than any of us, didn't fully register. My hands shook as I picked up the ledgers, clutching them like lifelines. One belonged to my father, one to my uncle, and both had saved our lives tonight. We stood in silence for several minutes, letting the adrenaline ebb. Then Karen said softly, "We need to get out of here." I nodded, glancing back toward the passage. The tunnel still descended into the earth, but at least it wasn't alive anymore. No whispers, no pounding, no unseen eyes tracking us. Just stone, concrete, and the cold reality of what we'd survived. We moved quickly but cautiously, the ledgers tucked safely against our chests. Every creak of the tunnel echoed like a memory, but it was ours now. The creature couldn't follow. Whatever the ledgers had bound, whatever spell we'd activated, was final. We had survived. Finally the passage opened into the basement of my childhood home. Dust motes floated in the faint glow from the hallway light. I exhaled, the tension leaving my body like a river, draining from a dam. Karen sank to the floor, relief and exhaustion overtaking her. I placed the ledgers on the basement floor and knelt beside her. We did it. Daniel's warnings, Dad's and Uncle Jonathan's work, it wasn't for nothing. Karen reached for my hand, squeezing it weakly. "Michael, you saved us." I shook my head. "We saved each other. For a long time, neither of us moved." The house was quiet now, almost peaceful. The shadows that had been alive with malice only hours ago were gone. The ledgers were safe. The secrets, finally understood, had done their work. I looked up at the basement ceiling. The house was just a house again, not a labyrinth of fear, but I knew, deep down, the memory of what we had faced would never leave. The ledgers, the carvings, the creature, they were a part of our history now, tied to the blood of my family. A warning, a legacy, and a debt paid, Karen whispered, almost to herself. Do you think it'll ever come back? I shook my head. Not if we keep the ledgers safe, not if we respect what our family did. But we'll remember it, always. We gathered the ledgers and carried them upstairs, placing them in the safe my father had installed decades ago. The combination had changed over the years, but I remembered the old numbers by heart. Locking the ledgers away felt heavier than locking a safe full of gold. This was more important than wealth. This was protection, life itself. Karen wrapped her arms around me. Michael, what now? I exhaled, letting my body finally relax. Now we live carefully, but free. The house creaked, settling around us. The basement was silent. The guest room upstairs was empty. The hallway no longer echoed with malicious intent. Daniel's death, my father's secrets, the creature's rage, all of it felt like a nightmare fading into memory. But the ledgers remained. And I knew, as I held Karen's hand and looked at the safe, that the fight we had survived would define the rest of our lives. Not because the creature could return, but because the world held things older and darker than we could ever imagine. Things that thrived on knowledge and secrecy, and that my family had once kept at bay. I whispered to Karen softly, almost in awe. We faced it. We survived. She nodded, and will remember always. The house was ours again. Safe, quiet, and full of shadows that no longer moved. For the first time in hours, I allowed myself to breathe. The ledgers had done more than save us. They had reminded us of what family truly meant: courage, trust, and sacrifice. Daniel, my father, my uncle, they had left us a path through darkness, and we had followed it. I looked out the window at the night sky. Stars dotted the darkness, indifferent, ancient. But we were here, alive, and somehow stronger. Karen squeezed my hand. Michael, we're home. I nodded. We're home, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed it.